the reason that this whole thing is so confusing to all of us, I think, is because of that complete 180 on the story. And from Shohei Ohtani's perspective, the way he has explained it without quite the same detail answering those questions is that he learned between that time of the first interview and the time that they came back to Tisha Thompson and said, no, this is a massive fraud. When did he learn that? How did he learn that?
Jeff, you may recall my name's Macon, and it's cool if like you throw in like a Macon sometimes, like a time or two during the interview. Makes us sound all closer.
I am not going to do that.
Yeah, do not address him this whole interview. Actually, just fucking talk to anybody with him.
I mean, honestly, the fact that you had to ask tells me everything I need to know.
No, I'm just a big production guy.
Short guy energy.
Try to help everything.
Do you know how tall Macon is?
I'm never gonna go after anyone for height.
Well, you're sitting down, so it'd be a good time. You could just rip into him.
Here's the thing. So my child is 6'1", and he will walk up to me, and he will look down with this combination of disdain and glee, and he will just say to me 5'9", and then fucking walk away.
Hey, so how tall do you think Macon is? Just take a guess.
I mean, you're 6'5", right?
No, I'm like 6'3".
6'3".
But I'm slouching.
Okay, well, clearly he's got his seat high up. I'm guessing 5'10".
Well, you all set him up with the line of questioning.
No, we didn't. We didn't.
I'm 6'4", but
Jeff,
Big Cat last week said I have very short guy energy.
Oh boy,
which I take as a compliment.
But Passan has tall
shouldn't.
guy energy.
He does.
Passan has
Yeah,
tall guy
I
energy.
do.
No
I
idea
do.
you're
The great hair helps.
when people see me in person for the first time, it's always, boy, you're a lot shorter than I thought. Fuck you too.
This is good. Let's roll right into this.
I think we've started.
We've started. We've got Jeff Passan joining us. This is our annual reminder that baseball has started. I didn't get any futures in. I got my ass kicked last year betting the futures, but I can just kind of sit back and enjoy the action. Jeff, I guess the first question I should ask you, because one of our producers in the building, producer Scott, is a Yankees fan. And you hadn't treated them so good in your preseason synopsis. I wonder if they're the one team without a loss who's fool's gold. Do you feel that way, or has something changed?
I don't know that they are fool's gold. They went in and beat a very good Houston Astros team in 4 consecutive comeback wins. That was the most impressive part to me, that they were behind every game, and come from behind wins, 4 of them in a row against a good team, says something. That being said, I have done this this is my 21st year covering baseball now, and one thing that I have learned is that you do not overreact to single-digit games in a 162-game season. You just can't sit there and say that this team is demonstrably different than I thought they were based on the smallest of small samples. So it was an impressive weekend for the Yankees. They have every reason to feel good right now. I think the points that I made still stand. I worry about injuries because of their age and because of certain guys' inability to stay healthy. I worry about the front end of the rotation without Garrett Cole. But this offense looked like it was really clicking. And if they can continue hitting like this, they're going to win a lot of games this year.
When do you know, Jeff? It's almost a silly question to ask after the first weekend. I did it anyways. But I wonder at what point in the season you're like, okay, I know who these teams are.
Memorial Day, so like
Yeah.
2 months from now. It's a long time because, frankly, anything between now and then, it's just subject to the vagaries of a full season, and it's a really, really long season. The NBA has a similar in length season, but they play half the games, and that's the thing. Baseball players are out there every single day. And so after 2 months or so, you tend to get stabilization of numbers. Team wide, individually, it's a little bit closer to a month, but you end up having guys who have incredible Aprils and then just fall apart for the rest of the season. So, when you spread the risk out over the entire team in terms of who's going to really come through with what they've been doing and who's going to maybe regress a little bit, Memorial Day tends to be a pretty good arbiter on how good a team actually is.
Okay, so do this on the other end. There's a couple teams that are winless right now in the MLB. I think the Marlins are one of those teams. Are the White Sox one of those teams, Kevin?
Very much so.
Okay. There's a couple of those teams that don't have a win yet. Is there any team that you're like, hey, don't panic about this team. They might be okay?
The White Sox are not going to be okay.
Oh, fuck, Kevin. The Astros are also 0-4.
Yeah, if we're looking at the winless teams right now, there are 4 of them. It's the White Sox, the Marlins, the Mets, and the Astros. The White Sox are going to stink. I don't think the Marlins are going to be awful, but already, Jazz Chisholm is complaining about the roof being open. Really, guy?
Jazz.
That's real close to Jizz Chasm.
Okay. All right.
You gotta. I'm not gonna say it because it would definitely be memed and repeated. But you, Macon,
You said your name.
you can go around, and if you just switch the CH and the J, it sounds like a Will Ferrell character or a John C. Reilly character.
No
now go
question.
ahead. What would that name be?
Yeah. Jizz.
No, the other way. There you go.
Chaz Jism.
Not Kaz.
Chaz Jism. Chaz Jism. Guy's name's Chaz Jism. We got it.
Hey, this is a Harry Carey.
He doesn't like
skit,
the
man.
roof open.
Harry Carey did.
Why
this
doesn't he like the
every
roof
broadcast.
open?
I said the shadows were screwed up and that it was difficult to hit. And I'm sorry. Baseball should be outdoors. I've never
agree.
enjoyed it. I've never enjoyed. And if you're in Miami, I understand if it's 100 and nasty and muggy in the summer. Yeah, I get why you keep the roof closed then.
Sweaty
but
palms.
It's nice there right now.
That's what I would worry about.
And I think keeping the roof open made absolute sense if the weather suggests that it should be open.
What about keeping the roof open in football? Aren't you a Chiefs fan? You're
I
Kansas
am.
City. Yeah,
Season ticket holder.
You didn't end up with frostbite after that NFC Championship game.
We were preparing to go. We had our hand warmers. We also what was the story about that? Were there some kind of drugs involved with the guys who died outside? During
that's
that weekend?
well, nobody died outside. I don't want to spread any misinformation because they're going to slap a roof on top of Arrowhead at some point because of liability. There were 10, 12 people that had some minor amputations. Now, this is a free country. If you don't want to cover your digits, if you want to do drugs in the parking lot before the game, if you don't want to warm up and take the proper precautions, then you will suffer as a result. And this is a free country. I think football should be outside, and I agree with you, baseball should be outside.
Also, don't be if you're going to go out into freezing cold weather, be prepared.
Yes.
That's the thing. Yeah, I grew up in Cleveland. I understand what it's like to stand outside for the school bus, when it's sub-zero and when there's a foot of snow around you. Don't be a moron is a really good operating ethos in life. And if you're going outside in sub-zero temperatures, prepare for it.
2 gloves, maybe.
All right, Jeff.
Sure.
Two preseason storylines. I'm sure we'll get to Shohei Ohtani, or as I like to call him, Show Me the Money.
Fuck you. Ask the question.
But let's start
He
with.
didn't even- his
Why
mouth
do you
didn't
invite
even-
me onto this show, Chris?
I don't know, dude. I don't know, dude. Jesus Christ.
Subjecting me to this shit?
Ask the
But no,
question.
I'm gonna show you the ways in which I know my stuff here, Jeff. Let's talk about the MLBPA coup, the attempted coup by Harry Marino and his paisans. All right, give us the scuttlebutt in the MLBPA and what it could mean for the sport in the future.
It's actually a very informed question, Macon. I give you some credit for knowing about it. Did you just go like search in my recent archives and see like the last 10 stories I wrote and come up with one that
Kinda what he did,
made
yeah.
you sound smart?
Even more than that, I listened to you and Clinton Yates on 2X about 30 minutes ago. Talk all MLBPA.
Well, I didn't. So
So-
tell me what happened.
You know, the MLBPA, when it started in the 1960s, it grew into the most powerful union in the United States just in terms of what they were able to get in bargaining. Like, they were so much stronger and better than Major League Baseball. And then it flipped. And, you know, over the last couple collective bargaining agreements, particularly the one back in 2011, they got their asses handed to them, and it was not good where the union was, and we had the 99-day lockout in the 2022 season, and the first year after that, $3.9 billion spent in free agency. All of a sudden, it's like, okay, good deal. This offseason, $700 million goes to Shohei Ohtani, $325 million to Yoshinobu Yamamoto, and the rest of the players out there get about $1.9 billion. And, certain guys who were expected to get 9-figure deals did not. And the middle class, for certain guys, more or less collapsed. And there was this undercurrent of disillusionment among players. And along comes Harry Marino, who, if you guys remember, a couple of years ago, the minor leagues got unionized, right? Like, that had been something that nobody ever thought was going to happen. Harry Marino was the driving force behind that. And so now, earlier this year, a couple big league players go to Harry Marino and say, hey, we want you to take over at the union. We feel like the leadership there is inadequate. And it begins this secretive campaign behind the scenes to try and get support, to get Harry Marino in a position of power at the union where he would be in charge of collective bargaining. And they made a play, and it did not work. But in the meantime, all of the drama and all of the the disillusionment with the union was thrown out there to the public. And how I think this impacts the future, Macon, is, the union's got a lot of work to do to try and rebuild trust and faith among its members so that it can go into collective bargaining in 2026 with the sort of solidarity and support that you need when you're going up against a juggernaut of lawyers like Major League Baseball's got. Like, the league has done a very good job of staking its position out, of having owner solidarity, and of really trying to turn the screws against the union. And we saw a long fight last time. My fear as a baseball fan is that the fight this time is going to be even longer, and that the 99 days has a chance to look like a pittance compared to what we could be looking at, which is a work stoppage that loses games, and that turns into something that's really nasty and really ugly.
This Harry Marino's a young cat.
Yeah, I don't trust him.
Well, Virginia law grad. so
Okay, never
tread
mind. I
lightly.
trust him.
Okay. Yeah.
He's a Virginia guy.
Yeah, I just saw that. Yeah.
No way.
Yeah.
So what? So why didn't it work?
It's interesting because some of the things that Harry Marino was talking about, he wants there to be more transparency when it comes to the finances at the union. A lot of players have complained. They feel like, the union doesn't spend its money well. And so he suggested an audit. And guess what? They're going to be doing a pretty deep audit of the place. So it wasn't the positions that he took necessarily that were wrong. It was the fact that exactly what you just said, Chris. He's 33 years old. He's not seasoned. He looks young. And the way that he went about this, trying to avoid telling Scott Boras clients what was going on because of the presumed tie between Boras, the super agent, who's
Turned
done
out to be
billions
right,
of dollars
right?
in business.
Yeah.
The tie between him and the current leadership at the union, whether there is anything there, I don't know for certain, but there's a perception that it's there. And I think the furtive nature of it all and how everyone was sort of trying to keep things on the down low, well, the guys who didn't hear about it were pissed and they raised a ruckus. And, support for Tony Clark, the MLBPA executive director, ended up getting rallied in the wake of all of that. So here's the thing. I think it was probably the only play to do it that way. If you're going, if you're going to go for the king, you got to do it and you got to do it secretively. But man, ultimately it did not work. And if there is any upshot to this, it's going to be that at least the players in the union and the people who run the union now are talking about this and are discussing their issues out in the open, because you know what it's like in locker rooms. Guys will whisper to each other, but when it comes to union business, how often will someone stand up in front of leadership and say, hey, you're doing this incorrectly and we're going to hold you accountable? No, because players are more concerned with themselves and trying to actually play the game, that union business ends up becoming a secondary issue, even though it is so primary to their livelihoods.
As evidenced by, look at the NFL in the last round with the CBA. I mean, you had less than half the players actually voting on basically their futures as employees of the NFL.
Absolutely.
And so you can tell that in each sport there is a certain delta between how much the players and the PA subsequently are locked in relative to the ownership group, which is always standing pat. They're always on one accord. And I kind of wonder, would you say baseball, the players union relative to other sports, do you think it's harder or easier to corral all those guys? There's a ton of players. I mean, it's different than basketball. They might be more plugged in than football, but I don't know. Is this a stupid question? There's a lot of guys from a lot of different corners of the world. And
No,
if you're trying to get on the same page, I think about Ohtani working through a translator. I'm not trying to be,
No, you're not. No.
I'm sitting here. I'm wondering, is it harder to rally a group of players that are from a million places and speak multiple languages?
Here's the problem with baseball. It's that the Latin players don't have a voice. You have a couple of factors here. Number one, when you look especially at the Dominican Republic, to a lesser extent Venezuela, when you look at the education levels of the players who are coming into the big leagues, it's awful. I mean, a lot of kids are dropping out of school, Chris, at 10 and 11 and 12 years old to start their baseball careers. And so while you have a lot of very smart players from the Dominican Republic, they're not necessarily as educated. And because of that lack of education, they're a little bit, they have the concern, well, if I speak up on something like this in a second language, no less, or maybe even through a translator, is this the sort of thing where anyone is going to take me seriously? And that's one thing I think that nobody at the union, dating back to the Latin American Revolution in the game, has really done. Nobody has embraced this enormous group of players who, frankly, are going to at some point potentially eclipse the number of American players in the game. I mean, you look at the big leagues right now, it's 30% foreign. That number is going up. Yeah. When you look at the minor leagues, it's half Latin American. Half of the 5,500 players in the minor leagues are from a Latin American country. It's a ridiculous number. And think about this. If you're the MLBPA and you are not actively including them in your conversations, you're doing your rank and file a disservice. There's one player of the 38 reps on the MLB executive board from the major league side, who's from a predominantly Spanish-speaking country, and that's Francisco Lindor from Puerto Rico. No Dominican players, no Venezuelan players. It's a huge fault and flaw of the union right now that it is not representative. And so when you talk with certain players from down there, it's really interesting. You ask them, what do they think about the union? And their response is, they're the guys who come in every spring training and give us a licensing check. That's all they think about the union. Because they're not included in the process, so why would they think otherwise?
And I don't want to speak out of turn, but in the NFL, there's always we have our one union meeting a year. There's multiple little drop-ins, but the one big one in training camp, and a lot of players who are kind of detached from the process stay that way because their foray into it is a 45-minute meeting in the middle of it's spinning. It's training camp. You're not thinking about that stuff. Yeah. So they it's hard to get everybody on the same page. To your point earlier, 945 or so players in the MLB, 30% are international players. So would it be about right to say it's about 300 international players in the MLB? Compare that to the NBA, 550 players or so, about 125 or so international players. And I wonder, because in the NBA, there's a lot more international players that come from places where they've already played in professional league. And so you're primed for some of these negotiation tactics, whether you've had an agent, whether you've signed contracts. And I don't know what it's like in baseball as much. It kind of feels like you're just shot out of this cannon and you're going where you're going, and there's no time to slow down and take inventory if you're coming from one of these Latin American countries.
Yeah, I mean, here's the calculus there. And, this goes to show where I feel like socioeconomics plays such a much larger factor into baseball than people recognize. So let's say you're from the Dominican Republic. I don't know if you've ever been to the DR. Poverty is rampant there. And a lot of these players grow up in just really impoverished areas. It's sad. But baseball, I mean, oh my God, baseball is the way out. And until recent years, especially back in the 80s, in the 90s, and even into the 2000s, they were using the Dominican Republic. Major League Baseball was like a factory for cheap labor. The amount that these players were being signed for with their bonuses paled in comparison to what the American and Canadian and more domestic kids were getting. It's embarrassing to look at the numbers. Guys signing for $1,000, $2,000 because, oh my God, $1,000, $2,000, it's a lot of money. But compared to what you were worth in reality and on the open market, it's the sort of wages, it's chattel. You should be embarrassed by it. Yeah. What that does in turn, when you are not paid as much as your domestic counterparts, is it pushes you toward, especially if you get to the big leagues, signing an early deal. And generally speaking, when guys sign deals before they hit free agency, they are well below market. And the reason that they're doing that, it's twofold. Number one, because they feel like they have to make up for the bonus money that they didn't get paid the first time around and support their family, but also because there is a poaching culture among agents that is particularly resonant with Latin American players, where agents want to go and get money while they can and get their fee while they can because they're worried that a guy is going to jump to some other agency and they're going to lose that potential fee. So you've got, the confluence of that. And what they do in the process is give away all of the leverage that they have in free agency. It's why when you look at a guy like Juan Soto, and I'm providing you guys a delightful transition here, when you look at Juan Soto, the fact that he is going to reach free agency as a player from the Dominican Republic, there's like a handful in the last decade who have done that, because the vast majority go and sign if they're worth a damn, go and sign deals before they reach free agency, and then instead of reaching it like 26 like Soto's going to, they reach it at 30 or 31 or 32, and that mega contract that they may have gotten had they turned down the initial deal is no longer there.
Well, I will take the opportunity for a transition, but I'm not going to go where you think I'm going to go. A little misdirection. What we're talking about MLB business. The Oakland A's, what are their margins looking like right now with their attendance? What's the business situation looking like in Oakland? And the fact that I heard they might actually move for a few years. What's going on with the Oakland A's?
They're a disaster, just like top to bottom, complete disaster. It's embarrassing for the sport, and it's embarrassing because they isolated a fan base that was passionate. And I understand the A's weren't selling out Oakland Coliseum every day. So you can argue it wasn't passionate enough, but
not even when
there
they
were
were
people
good.
There. Yeah, they did
They don't
fine.
hear that,
they
but
weren't
yeah.
they weren't filling up a football stadium, but they were not among the bottom tier. It's when they started sucking that people stopped coming. Wow, shocker there.
That's not usually the case.
And yeah, I mean it's major league come to life. Like that's what it is. You put a bad enough product on the field and people are just going to stop coming, and then you're going to have your excuse to move the team.
Yeah.
And that's what they've done. Did I miss something there? The smirk right now is...
You did, because he took us down this road of juvenile. You did earlier.
Yes.
Welcome to
Which
my
has
world,
just-
Jeff.
Okay. Well, you said it when they started sucking, everybody stopped coming. And I said, that's not usually the case. So anyways, we'll talk about... let's talk about this. I can't help it. It's the A's. Nobody's listening anyways. Nobody heard that.
Did I actually
like five
say
people
that?
heard that. Yeah. Well, yeah, you said that, but then
man.
it was a perfectly normal thing to say. No, but I mean, like,
yeah.
I'm hearing Salt Lake. I'm hearing Sacramento. Like, what the fuck are we? They're going to be the Vegas A's in 28. Like, what's going on? What do you think?
So the lease is up. I am gonna talk slower for the rest of the time here because I cannot walk into another situation like that.
Yeah,
again.
no.
The lease is up to Oakland Coliseum. The lease is up to Oakland Coliseum after this season, and do they want to stay there? Yeah, and they want to stay there because if the A's leave, then they're forfeiting upward of $80 million a year in local television money that they are NBC Sports California is contractually obligated to pay them as long as they're in Oakland. Now, if they go to Salt Lake, which has aspirations for hosting a major or for being an expansion franchise, and frankly is probably higher up on the list than people realize. What happens? They'll draw well, but it'll be at a minor league stadium. If they go to Sacramento, maybe some of the fans in the area are A's fans, but are they really going to go and watch this team? It just makes the most sense to stay in Oakland. But the great part at this point is that Oakland, the city, knows this. And so while the rent on the Coliseum right now is like $1.5 million, they're proposing a 3-year lease extension, but asking them to pay tens of millions of dollars a year for the privilege of staying there. And the city can do that because it understands that if the A's leave, they're forfeiting tens of millions of dollars more in television money. So they are just like, this is turning the screws on the team that screwed you by leaving. This is like a vengeance plot,
back.
Politics style.
Little Oakland fighting back.
Yeah, I know everybody knows the Shohei story. We've talked about it. It's been reported. I'm curious what you think transpired between however long it took, a couple days between when Ipe Mitsuhara talked to Tisha Thompson and the story was I gambled away a lot of money and Shohei was okay saying I paid that debt, to a little while later saying, no, it was fraud, I've been stolen from, and he's off the payroll. Do you think
Lawyers?
they read the contract a little bit more and said, not only can you not gamble, you can't pay off anybody's debts? I mean, it was a very quick reversal.
A hard right turn.
I wish I had the answer to this. The real answer is I don't know, but you're asking the important question. And that's what I hope in this process we're going to figure out, the answer to those questions. Because, the reason that this whole thing is so confusing to all of us, I think, is because of that complete 180 on the story. And from Shohei Ohtani's perspective, the way he has explained it without quite the same detail answering those questions is that he learned between that time of the first interview and the time that they came back to Tisha Thompson and said, no, this is a massive fraud. When did he learn that? How did he learn that? Is the story that we have been told that essentially something was said in the clubhouse and that, perked up Shohei Ohtani's interest, and then he started asking more questions. What does that mean? Does that mean that this entire time he was kept in the dark about it, even though Nesbolello, his agent, knew about it, even though Ipe Mitsuhara, his translator, knew about it? Was Ipe telling Nez, I'm telling all of this to Shohei, or I will let Shohei know, and then not informing him? Like, there are different layers to this,
right?
Where while what Ohtani said in the press availability was, I think, more than I expected, like the depth that he got into, he didn't answer some of the really important questions. And the biggest question to me at this point, who is investigating this? To whom did Shohei Ohtani's camp refer potential criminal charges? It's a vital question to ask because the entirety of this story depends on us being able to understand that, yes, Ipe Mitsuhara did commit these crimes that Shohei Ohtani and his camp are alleging. And if there's no investigatory unit looking into these potential crimes and pursuing potential charges of these alleged crimes, then why would we believe this version of the story to begin with?
Right.
And why are they being so opaque about it? Now, ultimately there may be some strategy behind it. And I fully acknowledge that it is not reporters, it's not their duty to tell us everything that's going on. But this is a really important question and one that I'm not quite sure why they're not answering yet.
Poke holes in this hypothesis I have. My hypothesis is that it is on some level Shohei Ohtani possibly, because the one thing that Ipe Mizuhara did not bet on was baseball, because he was afraid that he'd get in trouble with his employer. He's willing to steal from his friend, his best friend, the guy that he spends pretty much all day with, covertly, but he's not willing to, in the process, bet on baseball. It seems like there's somebody that has something to lose from a occupational or reputational standpoint.
So this is pure speculation, deduction, and
that's what we're doing.
Trying to be logical about it.
Yep.
This is nothing I'm reporting. But let's look at it like this: Shohei Ohtani has so much money. And I could see a scenario in which somebody says this is just money. But if you are betting on baseball in any way, Chris, it's a 1-year suspension if you're not betting on your team. It's a lifetime suspension if you are. And I could see that moral in between where someone could look at money as being fungible, but somebody could look at livelihood as being sacrosanct.
Mm-hmm. And you're implying that the translator might think this way.
I'm just implying any human being might think that way, that if you're hanging out with somebody who's really wealthy and they're going and spending a bunch of money on an incredible weekend, like, you feel pretty good about that. Like, they're going to be okay money-wise and they can afford this. But if it was something where their career was potentially threatened, like I think there's no moral ambiguity there. And
That's why I think
maybe
about
I'm
Shohei being the guy. That's because to me it doesn't make sense that the translator would be like, "Oh, that's a bridge too far. I might lose my job." You're gonna lose your fucking job if you get found out because you're stealing money from the guy whose job it is that you translate for. So I don't know.
I'll just say this: there is like so far where we're at, there is no evidence that it was him.
No.
That it was Shohei Ohtani who was involved in this at all. But I think where we need to be as reporters is we are always skeptical of stories that are being told to us, especially stories that involve potential criminality. We have seen too many situations where athletes have gone out and lied for their own benefit, and I understand why. I hope Shohei Ohtani was not involved in any way in this. I would like to believe that what he's saying is true because it's the whole artist argument, like I really enjoy the art that he makes.
Great art.
I really enjoy watching him play baseball, and I think he's the best I have ever seen do it, just because he is so capable of doing so many things. And so, as a baseball fan, I just want to see him go out there and play and be the best he can.
So if he's betting, and this is the question that I think, like ultimately might be the biggest one, and they find out it was him, I think that the cover-up's worse than the crime because he's not the first athlete, far from the first athlete, that's wagered millions of dollars on pro sports or college sports. And he's not the first athlete to use a bookie. Okay, these are things that are uncomfortable for the modern-day sports fan, especially when there's all these legalized options. Well, gambling's not legal in California. You get a hit of that dopamine. You need it. And especially when you're from Japan, and I know the setup's a little bit different there, I could imagine this source of entertainment might be a lot to turn down. If it turns out that he was gambling, and it might have been an exorbitant amount of money, maybe not relatively speaking, but it's a lot of money, who gives a fuck? If it's not baseball, that's how I feel. Do you think that people will feel that way if it comes out that he were in fact gambling? And does the cover-up spoil the whole deal? In that hypothetical situation?
Yeah. I think I'll speak to gambling in the way that society looks at it now, because I think that's what's pertinent here. I think we're a whole lot more accepting of gambling than we were 5 years ago.
No question.
And I look at it like that, like, okay, if somebody is rich and has a pastime that does not harm anyone, and frankly, like if you're losing a ton of money gambling, but it's your own money, then that's a choice you make. You are an adult. You understand that when you're wagering on anything, there's a chance for losses. And does that make you stupid and say you should probably stop and that the juice isn't worth the squeeze and that you should go find your action somewhere else? Yeah, probably so. But we have had throughout Macon, you know the feeling. We have had throughout the course of history with our athletes, dudes who love the juice, like they need the action bad. And whether it is, the reports on Phil Mickelson, the suggestions with Michael Jordan, or otherwise, it's not like some backbench athlete who's going out there and, throwing his money around. It's like the GOATs. It's like the big dogs. But usually, and that I worry a little bit, honestly, that because of those, those big names that have been in the past, it makes us think more that, maybe Shohei Ohtani is involved in this. I'm just, I get it. I'm just on the train right now that I am going to keep asking questions, and Tisha Thompson is going to keep asking questions, and all of us are going to try and get as close to the truth as we can, because this is a big, sprawling case where Shohei Ohtani, even though he's the biggest name and the headline out there, is actually just like a little speck in the grand scheme of the whole thing.
It's not the Ohtanis of the world you got to worry about. It is the backbench athletes, because they're not betting just on games. They are They are incentivized to throw games. We talked about that tennis ring a couple years ago where there's 180 players from 30 countries, players making $2,000 a match. They might not be breaking even depending on where they're traveling and where they're staying and that sort of thing. You talked about Dominican baseball players like, and maybe this has gone by the wayside, but guys making a couple grand or something on their first deal, like those are the people who are incentivized to really put the sport in trouble. These guys are just fucking up their bank accounts as long as they're not betting on the games. Does it change in Japan? Does his legacy change in Japan? Because I know they're a little bit maybe more conservative.
Hell no.
There we go.
He's a god there.
He's a god. He's going to be all right. I know the coverage has been a little different in Japan. All right, last question here, because I want to get you on your merry way, because there's a lot of baseball on these days. Okay, Mike Trout. Are we wasting Mike Trout?
Mike Trout's entire career has been wasted by that organization. It's one of the great shames of modern baseball that a player of his ilk and a truly all-time great has played in 3 playoff games and not won a single one of them. The fact that he and Shohei Ohtani were teammates for 6 years and didn't play a single postseason game together. It seems impossible that you can have that much talent in a room and just go nowhere with it. I mean, they didn't win a single playoff game, and Mike Trout is in his early 30s, and he debuted when he was 20. This is a full decade of all-time great baseball wasted by a franchise. And you just have to wonder, after this year, he's got 6 years and $222 million remaining on his contract. I was there the day he reported in spring training and we asked essentially, do you still want to be here? And he said yes. He said yes. And there's this really interesting, Mike Trout is an extraordinarily loyal guy, and I think he wants to be loyal, and he wants to win there. It's almost like at this point, it's a mission of his to see if he can bring winning baseball back to Anaheim. But the problem is they gutted their farm system last year in a completely foolish effort to build around Shohei Ohtani right before he needed elbow surgery. And it was so misguided, because if they had traded Ohtani at the deadline last year, they would have absolutely cleaned up. I'm talking like best prospects in baseball cleaned up. Like top 5, top 10 guys, could have gotten them. No question about it. And it was a missed opportunity because they went in the opposite direction and then completely cratered. And when you do that, it's the sort of behavior and action that can set a franchise back multiple years. And I'm sorry, but as Mike Trout gets older, you don't have the time to set the franchise back multiple years. And unless you're planning on going out and spending lavishly in free agency, which, oh, by the way, they didn't, you're not going to take this mediocre-ass team and make it a whole lot better. And so it's not just, can they trade Mike Trout? They could. They would be able to find someone who's, if he were a free agent this offseason, I think someone would give him 6 years and $220 million. But beyond that, it's, will Mike Trout get to the point where it's time for him to go and he recognizes that and he acknowledges it and he okays it because he's got a no trade clause and he's got the control of his career going forward?
Jeff, my last very quick question. A lot of talk about Major League Baseball uniforms this offseason. I know you may be biased because you got an American Spirit poster behind you. You're wearing an American Spirit sweatshirt. Do the Atlanta Braves need to lose the tomahawk from their jersey?
Oh my God, that was a fucking...
You are opening a Pandora's box here, and I simply urge you to read the column that I wrote during the World Series a couple of years ago, and my opinion has not changed on the subject. I'm not going to get into it anymore because Braves fans in my mentions are the nightmare of nightmares, and
that's a tomahawk?
It's a tomahawk.
I always thought it was a thing that they hit you in the knee, see if your knee...
Little Dr. Mallet.
That's what they need to claim.
That'd be a good pivot.
If they're like, nah, We've always been, what was the pitcher's nickname down there? Greg Maddux?
Yeah,
What was his nickname?
I think it was the
Mad
Ryan
Dog?
Express.
The professor?
Kind of looks like a doctor to me. So maybe
Yeah, the professor.
Yeah, the professor, doctor, same thing. Is the
The
ballot.
Atlanta annual physicals.
Jeff, I got an analytic question for
We
you.
all get one last one.
What?
Oh, I'm sure that's going to play well.
Yeah. White Sox. So it's me and about 8 other people that care. So what's the bigger number? Johan Mikata's number of chains he wears on his neck or the amount of home runs he's going to hit? What's the bigger number?
Guy
I'm
loves
going to
Mahata.
go with home runs, but I think the better question would be the combined weight in ounces of the chains he's wearing versus the
Does he
home
have
runs
this
that
many
he's gonna hit.
chains?
It's fantastic. You're just
acts
jealous, Kevin.
Your
Oh.
son has a chain, by the way.
He's got a scapular.
He's got a chain.
Is it like Waylon's chain?
Well, yeah, Waylon showed up with a W chain. To practice the other day. Kev was like, Waylon.
I didn't know I had to manage egos at the Little League level,
That's so good. All right, well.
What kind of chain are we talking? Like Cuban links or
No,
like,
he's just got a little necklace that says W.
It
It's got a
ain't
W.
little, Jeff.
Yeah,
it ain't little.
It's not very big. I don't even know where he got it. Kind of like I don't know who signed my kid up for fucking T-ball and baseball this spring. Coach Kevin.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
My
a
friend
lot.
here, Kev, I think my kid's going to play like one sport this spring. My wife's like, hey, we've got practices on Wednesdays, Fridays. We have 2 games a week on Saturdays. I was like, how the fuck do you end up in 2 leagues? He's like, Kevin didn't tell you? No. Kevin just signed him up. So
It sounds like there's some miscommunication in the marriage there.
yeah, maybe
Not in
so.
the friendship.
Same thing with the chain. I didn't know about that either.
I do have to say this because there was once upon a time where my son was also playing on 2 baseball teams at one time. And I went back recently and was looking through my email and came upon an email I wrote, and I sent it about 3 o'clock in the morning one time, and it was to the 4 other Little League dads who I was coaching with. And I went and looked through it and copied and pasted it into Microsoft Word just so I could do a word count on it. And I sent a fucking 1,400 word email at 3 o'clock in the morning
Why?
about how we should approach the championship game, what our lineup should be, what our pitching rotation should be. Chris, I'm gonna send this to you. The next
How
day
old was he?
in the morning, he was 10. The next day in the morning,
That is awesome.
I sent a text to the gentlemen who were coaches with me, and it was, guys, I'm so sorry that I'm such a piece of shit. Because who does that? No,
Drinking?
no,
Oh,
no.
Couldn't sleep, man.
No.
You're trying to win championships.
real change of heart
Yeah.
over the course of 7
No,
hours.
I'm a regular 3 a.m. bedtime person and up at 7. It's not
I
great.
just changed that. It's really good for you. Midnight.
I know.
dude.
I need to.
It's really good
I
for you.
need to.
You should try it. Okay. That's
Thanks.
why your son's
I appreciate
6'1".
that.
He's been going to bed early. You've been going to bed, 3 a.m. Jeff, we appreciate you, man. Thanks for coming on. We hope to get you back soon. And go Phillies and White Sox.
Always
and Blue
fun,
Jays.
boys. Thank you for having me.
See you,
Nice to meet you,
Jeff.
Jeff.